Hello, this is Ms. DB. In this video we are going to solve quadratic equations by factoring. We have already solved quadratic equations by graphing, so we're going to be finding the same solutions. We're going to be finding the x-intercepts or the roots of the function, and those are called the solutions of the quadratic equation. First thing we're going to look at is called the zero product property. You've used this before. It just says that if you have two things multiplied together and the answer is 0, then either the first one was 0 or the second one was 0. So if AB equals 0, then either A is 0 or B is 0. Just one of them is 0, you get an answer of 0. And we'll use that because what we're going to do is factor this quadratic expression, x squared plus 2x minus 15. Now, if you need to review how to factor, please look back in your previous folders to see how you factor trinomials. We've spent some time on this, and now you're going to apply that. So x squared plus 2x minus 15. We're going to look at the last term, which is negative 15, and we are going to find the factors of negative 15. Well, what times what equals 15? 1 times negative 15, negative 1 times 15, 3 times negative 5, and negative 3 times 5. Those are the factors of negative 15. We want to find the pair of factors that when you add them, you would get a positive 2. So none of these are equal to 2. How about this? Here we get a negative 2. That's close. And the last one would be a positive 2. So look for the factors that would equal the middle term when you add them. All right, so now that we know what the factors are, we're ready to factor, and that's, you would write x plus 5, x minus 3. Or, since I wrote the minus 3 first, I could do x minus 3, x plus 5. Either of those mean the same thing. And it's equal to 0. We're going to replace our f of x, or our y, with 0 in these problems, so that we can find where they would equal 0, which is the x-intercept. And then we set each of these parts equal to 0 because of the zero product property. The zero product property says for this to be true, either this factor, x plus 5, has to equal 0, or the other factor, x minus 3, has to equal 0. And then if you have x plus 5 equal to 0, you solve that equation. So to solve for x, we would subtract 5 from both sides, and x would be equal to negative 5. To solve the other equation, x minus 3, you would do the opposite, which is to add 3, and you would get x equals 3. And then you write both answers with the word or between them. We can check in a couple different ways. We can check by graphing, and we could use technology to graph this and see if the quadratic function indeed passes through the x-axis at these 2 points. We can also substitute in each number, each answer, into the original expression and then see if it equals 0, because we had x squared plus 2x minus 15 equals 0. So we should get 0 when we do both negative 5 and 3. And you'll find that this one is indeed correct. So for the first 5 problems, the equation has already been factored. You just need to write each of these equations equal to 0. So for the first one, you would do x plus 1 equals 0. And you would also do x minus 3 equals 0. And then you would solve both of these equations, do the opposite to each side so that you can get what x is equal to. And then you'll get another answer here. So both of these, or all of these first 5 questions, you'll get 2 answers for. Let's look at number 4. There's a number in front of the variable in number 4, which might make some people worried. But we still have our 2 equations, and it's okay that they're not x as well. If you were to graph this, you would want to put x back into your technology instead of t. Okay, so we have 2t minus 4 equals 0. Just think, I want to get t by itself. I have a minus 4. The opposite of subtracting 4 would be to add 4. So your first step is to undo the subtraction, or in some cases the addition. And then we have 2t equals 4, but I need t, so your next step would be to divide both sides by the number that's being multiplied to the variable, and you would get these would cancel, and you get t equals 4 divided by 2, which is 2. You would still get another answer over here, and I'll let you finish to find that. All right, then we have several problems where you are going to first factor and then set each factor equal to 0 and then solve each equation for x. So there'll be these 4 steps to do for each of these problems. And the first step is just to replace f of x with 0. Oh, I have a equals 0 and equals f of x there, so correct that one. Let's look at number 10. In number 10, we are first supposed to set the function equal to 0. You can either put 0 equals, or you can write the equation this way, equal to 0. Either way. And then we're going to factor. So when we factor, we put our 2 sets of parentheses, and then x and x, because our first term is x squared. Now we look at the last term. It's negative 99. We want the factors of negative 99 that when we add them together, we'll get negative 2. So what are the factors of negative 99? Well, there's 1 and negative 99, but those will not add together to get negative 2. Or negative 1 and 99, but those don't work either. What about 9 times 11? If I did negative 9 times 11, I would get negative 99. If I add these two together, I would get a positive 2, so I'm getting closer. How about 9 and negative 11? 9 times negative 11 is negative 99. 9 plus negative 11 does equal negative 2. So I have found my factors. I want a positive 9 and a negative 11. Now we're ready for step C, set each factor equal to 0. So then we solve each of these little equations. I have x plus 9. I need to undo the plus 9. So I would get x equals negative 9. And on this one, I need to get rid of the plus 11. So I do the opposite, which is adding 11. And I would get my 2 solutions are x equals negative 9 or x equals 11. And you will get 2 solutions for each of these up through this problem here. Now sometimes when you